Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for BASCHAMANIA, the wrestling podcast where you get to hear the best stories from the best wrestlers in the country. And today I'm excited to chat with 3-time/4-time NCAA All-American and 2-time Jersey State champion, David McFadden. I don't know too much of his story outside of what the average wrestling fan knows, so I'm really excited to chat with him and to help him get his story out there. If you haven't subscribed to this podcast yet, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want even more BASCHAMANIA, be sure to follow on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. With that said, let's roll the intro and get this show started.
It's BASCHAMANIA! Let me tell you something, brother. He gave us everything he had in him tonight. What you gonna do when BASCHAMANIA runs wild on you? Oh, it's gonna be a good one. And business just picked up here on the podcast. Oh yeah.
How are you, David?
I'm doing good. It's a nice morning, beautiful day in Blacksburg right now.
I'm not sure if I'm going to release this on video yet. It was like I'm starting to record more and more video, and any episode it's going to be like, bam, video now. This might have to be the video release with the flag hanging behind you. I'm like, man, I love that. I just ordered a flag for my garage, actually, so that's pretty funny. But yeah, man, as I was just telling you, I'm pumped for this conversation. And, you know, I've never heard the David McFadden story. Don Basch is a super good friend of mine. He's been talking about you for years. Slay thinks the world of you. So, you know, I've heard so many good things about you. So I'm curious, as I'm sure so many fans are, to hear your story. We might as well take it back to the beginning. Tell me how you got started in wrestling.
So I got started in wrestling when I was, I was about 5 or 6 years old, I think. And my town, we weren't very good at wrestling, but you couldn't wrestle until you were 7 or 8. So for 2 years, I trained in my living room with my dad. And I went to club at Wrestling Plus. So that was my high school coach, Keith Carson. That was the first ever practice I did was at Wrestling Plus. And, you know, for me at a young age, you know, I was in the hotbed of wrestling, North Jersey. So there were so many great wrestlers around, and I was traveling a lot to clubs, not like anywhere out of state, but, you know, Pascat Kills, all those clubs. And, you know, I started, you know, kind of getting good at wrestling. And I just, you know, I wanted to compete on these travel teams. Like when I was young, I really wanted to be good. So I kind of surrounded myself with, you know, older guys. You know, I was always the youngest kid in the room, getting my butt whooped. But I enjoyed that. You know, sometimes I would come home crying, but, you know, I loved it. And I was always like, I want to score a point on this guy. I'm going to try and score a point on that guy. And then I was on a travel team, Team New Jersey, Team Strength. And, you know, kind of when I started jumping levels at the youth age is when I met, you know, who's one of my best friends, Jordan Cutler. And he had about a half-size mat. I mean, we're 60, 70 pounds, 80 pounds, whatever. I feel like a half-size mat is good for us. But, you know, we were on a travel team, and he went undefeated that year. And my dad was like, you need to wrestle with this kid. And, you know, so we looked him up. And he was from Sparta, which is like, 30 minutes down the road from me. So my dad got in contact with his dad and was like, hey, can we train with you? And he was like, yeah, sure. Like I trained my son in my basement. And I went up there about 5 times a week from about 4th grade until 8th grade. And we trained almost every day together. And then, you know, when he was looking at Blair, I started going to the Blair room with Coach Buxton. And, you know, obviously being in the Blair room, you know, it was pretty intimidating.
I can imagine.
I'm in 6th, 7th grade, and, you know, you have everyone, right? They're the number one team in the country for however long. So that was pretty intimidating for me. And I just remember, like, me and Jordan, like, kind of stuffed ourselves in the corner. And Coach Danhoff and Coach Buxton came up to us and was like, what the hell are you guys doing? And I'm like, I don't know. You guys are calling out moves. I don't know what you're calling out.
Right.
But, you know, he kind of saw, like, he didn't let anyone in his room. Or he let people in his room, but he didn't let anyone wrestle with the Blair guys besides me and Jordan at that age. So that was awesome. And, I started jumping levels again. And I obviously thought about going to Blair, just, it was premier high school and with Coach Buxton. But I wanted to win a New Jersey State title, and I wanted to win a few of them. And that was a big thing for me growing up in New Jersey, is going to Atlantic City and seeing these experiences. I grew up watching the best wrestling, right? And I mean, if you've ever been to the New Jersey States, you know how great of a job they did.
It's a wild atmosphere. I've been a couple times.
It's wild, yeah. So they, that was just one thing for me that I was just like, I gotta wrestle in front of this crowd. I live for that stuff. Yep. And I made the finals as a freshman, and I lost, but it was just kind of seeing that, and I really think growing up in New Jersey wrestling and wrestling in Atlantic City really helped me in college, just in terms of that NCAA feel. There's a lot of people. The fans are wild. It's loud. There's a lot of pressure. And, I think that helped me a lot.
And what about your parents? I know you give them a lot of credit for how you were raised, and you didn't have some of these parents from hell you see in the sport a lot.
So I think for me, my dad wasn't a wrestler. He was a baseball player. So he really didn't know. I think for me at a young age, he kind of let me choose what I swam, I played baseball, I wrestled up until, or I played 2 to 3 sports up until I was in about 7th or 8th grade. I think 7th grade was the year that I went to one sport, and 6th grade was my best youth year, and I was playing 3 different sports.
That's wild.
Right? So I wasn't having as much fun with it. And I remember the one day, I'm a teenager, so I'm a little rebellious at this point. So I'm like, I'm quitting wrestling, trying to get a reaction out of him. I want to go snowboard with my friends. And he's like, okay, go do it. And I was like, what? He's like, go do it. He's like, if you don't want to wrestle and go to these tournaments, he's like, you don't have to. And I remember, so I went snowboarding that day. I remember sitting there, and I was like, dang, I wanted him to get mad. And I think, for him, he was like, listen, if you want to do that, go do it. It wasn't, I'm forcing you to go wrestle. And I think that's a huge thing that parents do, is when you're a kid growing up, you want to have fun. You want to have a normal life. You want to hang out with your friends, go to the beach in the summer, go on the lake, all stuff a kid should do. And I think if you deprive that of them, it can definitely hurt them in the future. And, my dad and mom let me pick what I wanted to do. They never forced me to go to practice. I always wanted to go to practice, right? I think at a young age, I developed that kind of champion mindset, which, not everyone has, but I loved it. I loved going into the room and wrestling with Joey McKenna and having him score 100 points on me, not being able to score a point on him.
Right.
But I was like, if I could get to his legs one day, I was like, all right, I'm going to take him down the next time. It was something like that. But I love that. I always trying to go in the room with the older guys and try and, just kind of set the tone for myself. And I think I have that mind. I've had that mindset, and that's helped me huge.
And I'm curious how that mindset's developed. You talked about being in the finals. I think Don was actually telling me that you went 2nd, 5th, 1st in junior states, which is nuts. To be a 3-time finalist, let alone 2-time state champion in Jersey is incredible. When you are in the state finals as a freshman, and then your sophomore year, talk to me a little bit about managing your expectations and balancing the highs and lows, where clearly if you're a runner-up your freshman year, next year the expectation has to be in your mind, I'm going to be a champion. There's only one way to go up. There's only one way to go, and that's up. And then that didn't happen. You take 5th, and then you rebound, and now you're 1st. Talk me through that kind of 2-year process of going from 2nd to 5th to 1st.
So I wrestled 113 as a freshman, so I was light, and I was cutting a decent bit of weight. And like I said, my dad didn't wrestle, so he didn't really know. I pretty much, the thing that helped me is I kind of, he let me figure out a lot of stuff on my own, and I think that's why why I am who I am today.
Sure.
Is 'cause I fell on my face a few times and figured out stuff along the way. So my sophomore year, I take third in the Beast of the East. I beat Anthony Giraldo, who was a 2-time state champ, and he was actually the champion in my bracket that year. I beat him. I beat him pretty good, and I was 126. And then over Christmas break, I hit a growth spurt, right? Mm-hmm. And I was at that point in the season where I couldn't go up because of matches, and my teammate was above me, and he was pretty good. It was just I just had to hold the weight. And I remember, it just didn't become about wrestling. And I remember that was like the most miserable time I've ever had wrestling. And I was like maybe like coming down from 135, after the Beast, after Christmas break, I get on the scale and I'm like 142 or something. And I'm like, what? Like, this can't be right.
Right.
And then, so I'm like, okay, maybe I ate a lot. I come back down, I make weight. After one tournament, I step back on the scale and I'm up back to 140. And I'm like, this is just going to be a miserable rest of the season. And I was, I ranked first in the state, ranked, whatever in the country. And then states came along and, there was no fuel, no fire, nothing. And it just wasn't a good. So after that year, I said, I'm done with cutting weight in high school. And I wrestled 145. And when I say cutting weight, I'm not, dropping 10 to 15. Right. I was 145. I went from 126 to 145, and then 145 to 160. And I just focused on wrestling.
Yep.
And that was the biggest factor. And then obviously Buxton, when he opened his club, had a huge impact on my life. So.
And when you reflect back on your time at Depaul, as you talk about these state championships and everything, what do you reflect back on if you were to kind of put that time at Depaul Catholic in a box or in a chapter of your career?
I think the biggest thing for me is it wasn't just me. We came in my freshman year. I think we were 3-12 or something ridiculous. We were bad, right? They had never won like a district championship or a county championship under Coach Carson. And so me, my buddy Nick DePalma and Will Key, they were two Wayne kids. So I was a West Milford kid, so I had to travel to Wayne to go to DePaul. And we had grown up wrestling together, and we were like, let's start something here, right? Like, let's start something here. Yep. And so we go there and we don't do anything like our freshman year. It was just us three. But then we started getting more guys to come in, more people. Yep. And, by my senior year, I think we might have had one loss. We had 7 state placers. I was a 2-time state champ. I think we had 7 or 8 kids go to Division I college, and we had won 2 or 3 group state titles. And, it was, we kind of built that, and that was awesome for us. And that was one of the things that I can look back on. And, after, they hadn't had a state champ since I think Gene Mills, and, he's a little older than us.
I'd say so.
I think that's one of those things where I, can say I was a part of building something. And, we just had I think we've had a state champ every single year since, we've graduated. So that was one of the things that. Exactly. So I think we had a big part in building that culture and building a winning team, and not even just in high school. Not everyone wrestled in college, maybe they started, but, they all graduated and they all went to a really good school, so that was the biggest thing is we set ourselves up for success there.
And I'm curious too, as soon as I say DePaul Catholic, I think about, there's so many guys in Jersey that I know that have that traditional Jersey Catholic roots. Like it's Jersey through and through. And I know over time, and I was just talking to Slay about this, and even our group text was talking about this, how much your faith has grown. And I'm curious how your faith has evolved from, a lot of Catholics get into a very religious type of regimen, and to many regards, I think that kind of robs them of a lot of joy and freedom. And I'm curious at when your faith started to really evolve to what it is now.
Yeah, so my journey is interesting, and it's obviously I'm still growing in it and still learning, and I think I'll be learning and growing my whole life.
It never ends.
It's just like in wrestling, you don't want to stay stagnant. Yep. And, I grew up Catholic, and when I came to school here, I became Christian. It was we have a program called FCA, and so I kind of started getting in that. But it's something you wrestle with, like, oh, like, what did I do here? Because I think the biggest thing for me is I looked at it like a book of rules. Like, you can't do this, you can't do that, and like it's like if you see a do not touch sign on there, what's the first thing you want to do is go touch it, right? So that's what plays with your mind. So I think for me, I was looking at it the wrong way, and then I had, one of my best friends, Brooks Wilding, and our FCA chaplain, Isaiah Mead. They kind of introduced me and started, guiding me along. I was like a lost puppy, and they kind of helped me. And then, when I met Frank Molinaro, he kind of changed my perception of everything. And, he kind of laid like almost like a blueprint out. And it was like, that's kind of when I found my calling, I would say, when I met those three people, Isaiah, Brooks, and Frank, and I'm still active and obviously in touch with all of them, and they've helped me grow and got dug me out of some holes in college when life's hard, and it's just it definitely grown over the years, and it's kind of made me into more of a man, and it's something that was a huge deciding factor in me going to Pennsylvania Regional Training Center and wrestling under Coach Slay. Is I feel like I'm more than a wrestler there. I mean, wrestling's obviously a huge part of my life, but to just not, just have wrestling and kind of have that whole foundation, and just, he's someone that, is someone that you want to mentor you in life. You want to be like that guy in life. And that was a huge thing for me. And, I'm really excited to just keep growing, not only getting better at wrestling, but obviously in my faith. And
I want to talk more about the Penn RTC, and we'll get there in a minute. In your college career, it's funny because I'm kind of aligning the timeline in my head as we're talking. And it's funny because I've heard you say, and I'm a guy who watches a lot of interviews, especially before doing the podcast, because I want to really understand the timeline and really understand someone. And listening to some of your interviews at NCAA's, you mentioned a number of times. I think the most repeated phrase you used was, there's a greater plan, right? There's a bigger purpose. And that's, of course, the time Frank was in Virginia Tech and helping you out. And I'm curious at how that helped you manage expectations. Like I've heard you say going into college, you wanted to be an undefeated NCAA champion. And you had so many ups and downs. I'm curious how, number one, how you manage those expectations throughout college, and also how your faith helped you manage those expectations.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of, lean on God. And that was one of the things that I didn't know. Like my freshman year, the only thing to me was wrestling, right? It was just wrestling. And it was like, I based my life off of wins and losses. And, you do that and, you might have a pretty sad life, but you might have some good moments. And, I always believe that there's a silver lining to things. And I always believe that, everything happens for a reason. And if you, have that faith and just truly believe yourself, like looking back on my life now, if I could tell you, sometimes where I've been in college and been like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. And then, look back at it now and I'm like, wow, like, I don't even know I was stressed over that. Right.
Yeah.
And, even with, the whole NCAA thing, it's like there's a greater plan. And as much as it was heart wrenching and gut wrenching, I look back on this past month and, there's silver linings and there's purpose and, I'm happy and,
did you keep that through college? Like I always talk to people on the show about it's sometimes easy to look back and say, it's okay. I lost that match, but this worked out and this worked out and this happened because of that. And, God's doing this in my life now. How are you doing it in real time? Where at NCAA's after a loss or after a win or loss, really, your mentality kind of stayed the same. Was it something that because of your faith you're able to do in real time versus wait 2 months of, look at if I was a wrestler, especially if I wasn't a Christian and I lost a big match, I'd be pouting for 2 months. I don't deal with disappointment very well. And it seems like you did. So if somebody's listening, a younger wrestler or whoever of a wrestler, and maybe they struggle with managing expectations and dealing with the disappointment, what would you say is a way they could help improve in that area?
You know, obviously, like I'm big in my faith, and I would love for everyone to be big in their faith, but not everyone is, and not everyone believes in the same thing. And I think the biggest thing is you have to have some type of foundation, and that's the biggest thing. You need to have something that is greater than yourself. You know, like for me, that's you know, God is greater than myself. And I think, you know, if you don't believe, then you need to have something that's greater than yourself, whatever it is, because I think having that firm foundation is huge. And, you know, when life gets harder, when life's good, you know, you got to balance out the highs and lows. You know, it's, you know, take it with a grain of salt, you know, and obviously wrestling is, you know, it's you know, the community's pretty tight knit too. So, yeah, I would just say the foundation, just having that firm foundation, having the building blocks to, you know, kind of persevere.
Yeah. And, you know, we were talking last week when, you know, I think the NWCA came out and basically designated All-Americans.
Yeah.
And there was some confusion initially because, and I didn't know this, I saw Tony Ramos and Pat Tochi going back and forth about it, where the NCAA doesn't officially recognize All-Americans. It's funny. I guess the NWCA does. So, you know, initially you were a 3-time All-American. Now it looks like you're the first 4-time All-American in Virginia Tech history. What does that mean to you, and what do you think about as you reflect back in your time at Virginia Tech?
Yeah, so the All-American, so I mean, it's still hard to wrestle with it, right? Like, you know, people are like, you're a 4-time All-American, but obviously it doesn't feel like it. You know, I wanted to, you know, go out how I wanted to, but you know, obviously I think for my parents, and, you know, maybe when, you know, I have kids someday or something, like, you know, my name's engraved in a record book, you know, that's for them to figure out, right?
Sure.
That's not for me to be like, I'm a 4-time All-American, you know. In my eyes, you know, I wrestled 3 times, got on the podium 3 times, and that's how it was. But, you know, if they want to put me in the record books as a 4-time All-American, you know, I'll kind of let it be. And, you know, that was, you know, something special for me, is I wanted to be the first national champ and 4-time All-American at Virginia Tech. Yeah. And that was, you know, a huge reason of, I saw what they were building in Blacksburg, and I saw, you know, just this culture of a team. And, you know, we were just, you know, all hardworking blue collar kids, right? And that was, you know, I was like, you know, this is awesome. They don't have that much history yet. You know, I could be a freshman All-American, 4-time All-American national champ. Like, I could bust open the record book. Right? And that, you know, that's something that, you know, I was like, you know, I'm going to be like the first in history, you know, like when I come back to Blacksburg for football games and show my friends, like, there I am, you know, that was, that would have been, that was going to be cool to me. And, you know, I think for the most part, I you know, had a pretty good college career, and, you know, dealt with a lot of adversity, and, you know, I think has set up my life, and I'm pretty grateful for it.
And what do you think about, you know, it's funny, you mentioned that when you were at Depaul, they were terrible when you got there, and you helped build something. And I think similarly at Virginia Tech, you were a part of not only Virginia Tech's program building, but the ACC as a whole. The last 4 years, like throughout your career, 5 years, what the ACC has done and how much it's improved. Like, what was it like being a part of that?
Yeah, so just to kind of see the ACC grow too was huge, and I think that's huge for wrestling, right? Obviously, you know, looking back, it's like wrestling in the Big Ten would have been cool. And I think after 4 years of or 5 years of college, you know, I definitely saw, you know, a difference in just, you know, a bigger school, bigger atmosphere. But you know, I mean, being a part of, you know, growing the ACC and Virginia Tech, I mean, I think we averaged like 4,000 fans or 3,000, and, like, you know, when I committed there, it might have only been 1,000 to 1,500, right? So we pretty much dealt with those numbers, and, you know, just wrestling all these rules. People want to watch good wrestling, and there's good wrestling outside of the Big Ten, and, you know, it's obviously the Big Ten's like the SEC for football, but, you know, you have some powerhouse teams. I think there were three ACC teams in the top 10. So more than half of the ACC teams were in the top 10. And I mean, that's when
that says a lot.
That wasn't a thing like 10 years ago, you know? And that was awesome to kind of be a part of that. And
what do you think some of your favorite matches were as you look back? Not even just in college, up until this point, you know, you had an incredible high school career in Jersey. You had an incredible career in Virginia Tech. You even made a U23 world team in 2018. You've had a lot of incredible matches. What do you think some of your favorites were?
My favorite, so starts out, you know, high school first state title. You know, I was Coach Carson's first state champ. So, I mean, to know him my entire life and to give him his first state title, you know, it was a pretty emotional moment. Just a lot of hard work. And, you know, it was a dream come true from watching as a little kid, you know, and just to finally get that first one, that was just huge for me. And probably my second favorite match was when I All-American my freshman year. You know, I was 18 years old, and you know, I had a torn ACL. So not too many people know that. That story never really broke the news, but looking back on that tournament, that run, you know, as an 18-year-old kid, I wasn't really a kid, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I you know, was 18 years old, and I tear my ACL the first match of the NCAA tournament. First match, I heard the pop, and wrestle my second match on one leg, and you know, I get shot up, you know, with some medicine to make it feel better. Yeah. And I wrestle seven matches on one leg. Wow. So that was huge for me looking back on that. Yeah, that was a pretty.
How did you do that? Like, even with shots, I don't care what you're putting in your body to overcome that. Is it straight adrenaline? Like, what is it? I mean, I asked Yanni that because I know he did something similar with injuring his ACL, but I don't think that was to like the quarterfinals. Like, you had a lot more matches. How did you do that?
At that, you're not going to not wrestle in the NCAAs, right? You're just going to find a way. And I think for me, like, I found a way. And I mean, I was in serious, serious pain. But once the match got rolling, it was like, you know,
Did it change the style you wrestled?
When I wrestled Bo Jordan a little bit, because, you know, I did my little routine right before the match, you know, walk back and forth, and I, you know, bounce. And when I bounced, like, I didn't understand that I tore, like, I didn't know what happened. I just knew I heard a pop in my knee. I knew it hurt. I was limping a little. I was like, whatever, like, don't be a baby, right?
Right, just a torn ACL. Just keep going.
So I wrestle him, and I mean, I'm literally like, as soon as it popped, I almost took injury time. And the match hasn't even started yet, right? Hasn't even started. So I wrestled that entire match, and I mean, he got the best of me. And I remember I went to my trainer, and I was like, you know, something's seriously wrong. Like, I woke up the next morning, and the weirdest thing is my knee wasn't swollen. But I'm like, listen, like, I cannot walk. Like, I had to be pretty much carried. I pretty much had to be carried the second day to NCAAs, and I'm pound or two over still. So I can't even run, right? I can't even run. I can't even bike. Like, I'm just sitting there, and I'm freaking out because, you know, there's about an hour till maybe 45 minutes ends. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. So luckily we had a doctor with us. You know, he gave us, you know, a legal shot. It was completely, you know, legal. And, you know, I was running like 5 minutes later. I'm like, I don't know what they put into my body, but it made me feel pretty good.
But I don't care.
And, you know, it didn't bother me until after the entire tournament. And that was one of the things when I found out, like, hey, I just wrestled the NCAA tournament with a torn ACL. I was like,
so you didn't know until after the tournament was over?
I just knew there was something wrong. And then I got an MRI like the week after, and then got surgery. And I was like, you know, it was completely torn, just like there was nothing left of it. So, and I knew something was wrong because every time I walked, my knee would just give out. But it was crazy.
Yeah, there's so many stories, I feel like, and it's one of the reasons I started this podcast was to get as many of these stories out there. And I've been hearing so many. Like Mark Perry just told me how he basically, his doctor said, don't wrestle in NCAAs. You're going to hurt your neck and you're never going to be able to wrestle freestyle. I was like, I don't care. I need to be an NCAA champion. Gwiz told me something similarly. I can't remember if it was his foot or his hand, something he almost broke, and it was the same thing. He couldn't walk. I think it had to be his foot or his ankle, something. Over at the World Championships, he couldn't walk. He basically limped down, got a shot of something, and was able to compete. But he said it changed, the way he wrestled a bit. And I think there's so many stories of perseverance and adversity that are on the surface that people hear about, but there's so many more. Is there any others that you can think of throughout your career that maybe people don't know of, whether it's adversity you had to overcome or anything along those lines?
I mean, obviously wrestling adversity, just in terms of health, I wrestled my junior year with a torn UCL in the NCAAs. I tore it the day before ACC's wrestling Mackay. And, it bothered me, but I rehabbed it back to full strength, and then I wrestled the World Championships with a high ankle sprain, which was, I thought I snapped my ankle in half. It sounded like a gunshot went off. And, I came back probably a little quicker and re-sprained it and, kind of wrestled on a sprained ankle that entire year. And, so those are just in terms of injury, I guess the adversity I had to overcome with that. So.
And now moving forward here, you just announced a couple days ago you're going to head over to the Penn RTC with Coach Brandon Slay. And man, he's doing something special over there. You see the group of guys that he has, and I know there's others that are seriously considering heading over there as well. What was the main reason you went over there? We kind of alluded to it. You mentioned both your faith in growing more as a man, but I'm curious your take on really why you went to the Penn RTC.
Well, in terms of, I knew wherever I was going to set myself up for wrestling, the next step, I really thought having an RTC coach, and I have a pretty dang good one, right?
Yeah.
I thought that was a huge factor. And, so I started looking, in the Northeast, get back closer to home. And, I actually, my sophomore year, me, Frank, Ryan Blees, and Brent Moore went up to Philly for a week to train. And we went up for a week to train. So I developed a relationship with Coach Slay there and Coach Reyna. And, after, I was seriously thinking about getting into coaching. And, like I said, everything happens for a reason. Maybe, I would have got into coaching. I don't know. But I wanted, I didn't want to go out the way I did. And I still feel like my body's ready to rock and roll. And, I'm going to try and go on a, hopefully – 2 cycles, maybe more, so this was a long-term thing. I wasn't just going to, I don't want to just wrestle for a year or two and then it was either I'm going to flip the switch or, go the other way. And, when just talking with Coach Slay and Coach Reyna, just how much, I felt like that they cared and to already have that relationship with them and obviously what they are doing down there. I was serious about coming and, I couldn't take a visit because of COVID.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there and I'm like, I gotta get a feel for what Philly's like. So I took it into my own hands and drove down there and, Joey was there and I was like, we wore our mask, wore our gloves. And I was like, listen, I'm like, we did practice every rule that there was, but, we just walked around and kept our distance. But, I looked at the city and I was like, I'm not a city boy, but this was, it's a smaller city. It's really pretty. And, just to kind of have that home feel was huge for me. I felt some other places I might have not had that home feel, and I was ready for a change. And, it just, once I saw that, I was going to I was going to call Coach Slay on the next day. And I was driving back and, telling my mom how awesome it was. And just, I knew where I wanted to go.
Sure.
But it was I had to see it for myself. And, because I was going to move there for, a huge portion of my life. And it just, I just, as soon as I got done with it, I knew it was the right fit. So I was driving home and I was just on the phone with my mom, and, I was like, I'm going to, I know where I'm going. This is it. I'm going to call them tomorrow. And I couldn't wait. So I called them that night, and we got on a Zoom call. And, I was just, in terms of a wrestling coach, Coach Slay is, everyone I've talked to, and, you never hear a bad word out of him. He's a great human. He's someone that I want to, follow. He's going to lead me right in life. And that was a huge thing for me, because wrestling's always going to be a part of my life. But, there's more to life than wrestling, right?
Yep.
And that was a huge part for me. And just the belief that he has in me. And it's huge for me. And the wrestling part was going to take care of itself with him. And the other stuff is just an added bonus and really important in my life.
Yeah, and I don't want to downplay at all what Dan Valmont and Rich Perry and what guys have done over there, but it's almost like, again, for another time in your career, you're going to help build something. Like, the writing's on the wall. Something special is happening there. You talk about yourself going, Joey McKenna going. They already have guys like Valmont and Rich Perry, and it's something that, as people are watching now, Ben Hannes Monday announced he's going. Like, you're seeing more and more, and there's guys that I'm hearing are potentially coming. It's like, man, you're going to be part of. You helped build a high school program, then you helped contribute building a college program. Now you're going to help potentially turn this Penn RTC, which was a run-of-the-mill RTC. It was nothing crazy. It was nothing too special, but it sounds like it's going to be something special. What does it mean, and how excited are you to potentially build something and help build something in the Penn RTC when you've seen how that plays out? You've seen how you were able to help build a high school and college program with your presence. What does that do for you going into this situation?
Well, I honestly think for them, the foundation was built with those guys. Those guys, they're unbelievable wrestlers, but they're even better people. Those are guys that, who have wrestled under Coach Slay. And, that was another thing for me, is these guys are all super successful after wrestling and during and in wrestling. And, those are guys that you want to be around, and you want to, be around others that are succeeding at the same level as you. And that was a huge thing for me, is when I went up there and trained, it was a team. And I think that's what Coach Slay is building, is he's building a team. He's not, he doesn't just want one or two guys. He wants, 10 weight classes, if not more. And, I do believe that having a group of people that are all chasing the same goal, is huge. And I really believe that we're all just going to feed off of each other. And, the foundation is built, and now it's time for us to just keep building on it, and then for the next wave to come, and then the wave after that. So that's what I'm excited to do.
Yeah, and that's why I said, like, no disrespect to all those guys, because you're right. They've already built something that has been brewing. Coach Slay has been doing incredible things, and now it's like you're helping it take it to the next level. You and the group of guys who are coming straight from college to making this a top RTC and a top program, it's so cool to watch, even from a fan standpoint. And I'm curious too, when you have a group of guys like that, and you have more and more coming in, what does that do for your confidence? When, look at, you're going to be at 74 for this, 2021 Olympics now, where you have guys like Nolf, Imar, Dake, Burrows, and I'm assuming you're going up to 79. For 2022 and on, and you're going to have a ton of guys if Dake maybe goes back up, or guys like Mark Hall and Derringer. There's so many studs and hammers, but to have a bunch of studs and hammers in your room, like, what does that do for your confidence that, hey, I know I'm an amazing wrestler, and I have the talent and the skill, my accolades kind of prove that, but when you talk about iron sharpening iron, it seems like you have everything. You have the bodies. You have guys who they have their heads on straight. You have a group of Christians who, I think, who better to get your mindset right than the guys at the Penn RTC. What does all that do for your confidence in what you can accomplish on the senior level?
Yeah, it's super exciting. And I think the biggest thing is, my coach is going to be someone who's done it, who has won at every single level, right? And that's huge for me, because I think having blind faith is huge, right?
Yep.
And having faith in your coach and your teammate. And listen, their results are proven, right? When, for me, like one of the biggest things, when Frank was at Virginia Tech, I had complete faith in him, right? He had coached 3 national championship teams, had won national championship, had made the Olympic team. Like this guy had coached, coached and wrestled. I think he wrestled on 4 national championship teams, won a known individual, and coached on 3. It's like whatever this guy is going to tell me to do, I'm just going to do it.
Right.
And that's how it's going to be with me and Coach Slay. Is whatever he tells me to do, I'm just going to believe that it's going to work, and I know it will, and that outcomes are proven, and that's a huge thing for me, is just that faith part, and that, just having complete and utter trust in what he's doing. And, it's the results are shown, and, it's time for me to kind of prove my own results.
Yeah. I mean, the Bible tells us to have a childlike faith. And I think when you have that, I don't want to say childlike trust, but that utter, whether it's blind faith and trust, whether it's a childlike faith and trust, to have that utter trust and faith in those around you is an incredible thing. I can only imagine. And last thing here before I let you go, right now we're obviously stuck in this quarantine. It's like the wild, wild west. How are you continuing to work towards your goals with, such limitations in place right now on who you can practice with, what you can do, so many things being closed down? How are you kind of keeping your perspective right now?
Yeah. So, I took, complete 2 weeks off after the season, just kind of let my body regroup. And, I felt like it needed even a little more time. So I was just, not doing anything stressful on my body for 3 weeks. And, when I went back to New Jersey, I saw like direct impact of this virus. So, I was taking it very, very seriously. So I was staying inside, running on the treadmill, lifting in my garage, working with what I had, right? Like I wasn't getting on the mat with people, and I haven't gotten on the mat in a month since, the last day, but, I can't. And, if people are doing it the right way, I know a lot of people have a garage with a mat, like they're lucky, that good for them. But, I don't have that. So I'm trying to just sharpen my skills. And, it's like, when I got surgery on my ACL, right, I was out for 8 months. It's like, you don't forget how to wrestle, right? You just got to actively do stuff so you're not taking steps back. And, I think, like I said, like a silver lining, like, maybe more of this time off is good. like I felt like towards the end of the season, I was losing a little bit of fire, and, I'm just itching to get back on the mat, but I'm obviously taking it serious. So when the time is right, I'll be back on the mat. But I think just kind of doing cardio and lifting. And like I said, like for people that are stressing out, you're not going to forget how to wrestle, and anyone that has been out for a strenuous period of time, when you're injured or when you can't do something, you make everything around you stronger. So I'm, lifting more or doing more cardio, stuff that I wouldn't do as much during wrestling, so there's other ways to get better. And obviously watching film is huge.
It's going to be so interesting, dude, to see what happens with the hunger. Like, Ashnall was telling me that when he was on, that when he had his injury, the entire time he was on the sidelines, it created such a hunger, and it made that fire burn brighter and sharper and hotter than ever. Like, I think we're going to see a group of guys heading into the 2021 Olympic trials that are so freaking hungry to be on that team and to win an Olympic medal. And it's not that they weren't hungry leading up to April 2020, but man, now you have all this time just kind of metaphorically sit in a room and think about how bad you want it. And you talk about a group of wrestlers doing that. That's a dangerous thing.
Yeah, and I think, when you get knocked down, right, you get right back up, and that's what we're taught. And, it's not like it's just one person, right? It's a whole group of, wrestling, basketball, spring sports, professional sports, college sports. Everyone is dealing with the same thing, which I guess, in terms of when sports comes back, man, you're going to watch. You might not watch right away the most high level and then super crisp play, but you're going to see a lot of people with passion playing. I'll tell you that much.
For sure, man. Well, listen, I'm going to let you go here. I know you have some other interviews to do and some other stuff to do. Anybody listening to this, go follow him. I'm going to link up his Instagram, his Twitter, all that good stuff. Follow the Penn RTC. They're going to have a lot of exciting things happen. Anything else you got for us before we let you go?
No, this was awesome. And, just before I go, I just, I want to thank Virginia Tech, and, Coach Roby and Coach Dresser, even for bringing me here, because I think for college kids, this was the one thing, that I chose, part of a reason I chose Pennsylvania. Obviously the wrestling was good, but it was a place that I could call home. And, I think that's a big thing for high school kids is they get too caught up in the bells and whistles of what's going to be. It's, Blacksburg has been home for me for 5 years. I couldn't have enjoyed college more and couldn't have had a better experience. And, I met some of the best people in the entire world. So I think in terms, it was, I'm very blessed and very fortunate. And, especially to continue my career at Pennsylvania Regional Training Center. And thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's going to be fun, man. You'll have to come back on. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of exciting things to talk about in the future. So we'll do a part 2 in the near future.
Awesome. I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Awesome, man. We'll talk soon. And that is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. If you did enjoy this episode of the podcast, be sure to leave a 5-star rating review on Apple Podcasts, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on more episodes. For more wrestling content, be sure to follow BASCHAMANIA on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and follow me. I'm at JBash on Instagram and at JustinJBash on Twitter. I'll be back with another episode shortly. See ya.
And the beat goes on.